Welcome to It's Personal, Finance Canada. I'm Christine Conway.
And I'm Cameron Conway.
And this podcast is a very personal look at personal finance in Canada. Welcome to It's Personal Finance Canada. I'm Christine Conway, here with Cameron Conway. And if you're in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, or the Yukon, feel free to find us at braunfinancial.com. So in the last couple of weeks, I've been having conversations with a client who has been wanting to retire for quite some time now. And due to some very fortuitous situations, he has more than enough money. He has saved well. Everything has lined up. The stars are perfectly aligned.
In other words, he listened to Christine over the years.
He did very well for himself. But despite countless hours of number crunching, back and forths, reassuring conversations, he just cannot seem to pull the trigger. And this got me thinking, because this is not the first time that something like this has happened, where someone that I feel is very much ready and capable of retiring, and they just, for whatever their reason, don't seem to want to do it, in spite of telling me over the years, oh, you know what, I can't stand my job. I hate the management. I hate this workload. I hate this flow. So it's not like they're in a happy situation at work, but it's something along the lines of giving up that security of having a stable job that they've had for a prolonged period of time.
I think this is the first time I've ever heard you kind of imply that maybe a job is someone's security blanket, and it can be hard to let go and kind of move on to the next thing. Or it could also just be the big debate of, is what I have enough to take care of me going forward?
That's exactly it. People view jobs as their lifelines. And if you think about it, your job has been providing your source of income for years now, right? I mean, of course, it's you going out and doing the work. And of course, you have the discernment to pick your employer, to pick your career field, what you do, your profession. But when it comes down to it, someone else has been giving you a paycheck consistently for your services for really as long as any of us can remember, right? I mean, soon as you're out of school, it's like, what are you doing for work? How are you going to generate an income for yourself? How are you going to support yourself? And then later on, how are you also going to help your family?
Yeah, it is one of those kind of pivotal parts of your life. It takes up what could be for some people like 40 or plus years. You kind of go through this working phase and just that usual clock in, clock out, spend the money, get the money, go back to work, do it all over again. And there can be that apprehension of, can I keep doing this? What is the next part of my life? What exactly do I do? And am I actually ready to kind of go through a transition?
And it is a transition. It's very much a transition, especially if we're thinking about it as that security blanket, that constant, consistent paycheck that you've relied on for so long. That is a big thing to pull that away, right? It's cold, it's dark, it's scary. It's a lot of things to step out into the great unknown, where now you feel vulnerable. You feel like, what if I do run out of money? I could lose my ability to get a job again in the future. What if I get older and no one would be willing to hire me? Or what if my skill set changes because I've been out of work for a period of time, or my health has changed? There are so many factors that people, even people who are unhappy in their current work environment, are afraid that if they let go of that consistent cash flow, they could find themselves in real trouble.
Yeah, and a big thing that really drives all of this kind of uncertainty can actually be the markets themselves. Like, we are in this point now, in 5 years, we could be staring down the barrel of like a third recession and then all kinds of craziness. And even in a good period of time, there is still that apprehension of, oh, what if the market does this? What if the market does that? What if the markets suddenly go into recession, depression territory the day after I retire? Because this is one of those things that is outside of our control, which is why we kind of harp on like asset allocation, balancing stuff out properly, being proactive in your investments. But this is sort of just more gasoline onto that fire of fear. what will the markets do and how much will I suffer because of whatever happens, especially now, because it just feels like every single time someone talks, the NASDAQ and the Dow drop 2%.
Well, I think that's exactly it. When you cut out a job, that security blanket, you're left with the whims of uncertainty, the uncertainty in the markets, the uncertainty of your own health and as you age and how long you're going to need this capital to last, right? But let's talk about the markets first. When the markets go down and someone is retired, that propensity to get scared of the ultimate outcome actually increases. Because if you find yourself in a position where you can no longer go back and recoup your losses by earning more money, it's human nature then to be more inclined to try and protect what you have. And unfortunately, that desire to protect what we have is what can harm us so badly, because it's going to tell us that in order to be safe, I need to sell right now before things get worse. And depending on when you're having that conversation with yourself, if things are already bad and the markets are down 20% or 30%, you could do incredible harm to the longevity of your money by taking it out at the wrong time. And this is something that we've seen that's been historically tested over and over again by financial planners, people that work in these kind of statistical roles where we're looking at probabilities and how cash flows change. And even if you think of it in terms of your own financial plan, your plan in most cases didn't factor in a fire sale at an incredibly depressed price. There might have been historical testing, but part of that historical testing is the assurance that you'll be in the market when it bounces back. If you don't stay in the market and allow yourself to participate in that rebound, which usually happens right after the drop, then it can consistently and pretty well guaranteed skew it to the negative.
Yeah, it's really hard to kind of pre-time the market to the rebound unless you know things you shouldn't know and shouldn't be trading with that information. There are laws about that. But no, it's hard to like successfully predict the rebound every single time. And like Christine was saying, this is something that experts, portfolio managers, economists, even Wednesday this week, I was watching a webinar with Bank of Montreal's, a couple of their top economists. They were saying the same thing there. That is just, sometimes you have to ride out these little waves, not to panic, not to sell. I'm not saying to never sell, but just don't do the reactionary sell on Monday and everything rebounds on Thursday. Now you're paying more for the same stocks and funds you had a week ago. Don't just burn money for no reason.
Well, and sequence of return risk is very much real. And that is the math that basically says if you're someone who has just retired and then the market drops, your portfolio will be impacted the worst over the long term versus someone who retires, has 10 good years, and then experiences the exact same market drop.
Yeah, this is where a reminder seems to have to come in, because you can tell yourself, oh, I've got like $1,000 in stock for company X. So prices drop and think, oh no, I lost money. But no, the stocks you hold lost value. You still have like those 10 shares you did a week ago. They're just worth less today. But if you dump those shares, they are gone.
So the real value is holding that asset. The real value is consistently maintaining those shares if you believe that the company that you're invested in is going to do well over the long term. And by long term, I mean for you, the length of your time in retirement. So if you're early retirement at 65 and you think you're going to live till 85, 90, 100, that's potentially a 40 plus year change, right? So that should be the time horizon that you're assigning value of how well do I think this particular company will do.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, it's just that change in mentality. It's not I have $1,000 of stock. It's I have 10 or 20 shares that today could be worth $1,000. Tomorrow could be worth $800. Day after that could be worth $1,200, and then another day from that could be back to $1,000. But that whole progression, it's still the same same 10 hypothetical 10 shares. Those don't change until you kind of hit the buy or the sell button. And this is something that I've seen people kind of lose sight of. It's just only the dollar amount in their head, which will fluctuate. But the number of stocks you have in that company, the number of units you have in that mutual fund or that seg fund doesn't change until you do something.
Well, yeah, and I think it's helpful to think of stock ownership as your participation in the good and the bad decisions of the company that you're investing in, right?
Or
You
someone else.
or someone else. But no, it's you are aligning yourself with this company that you have chosen to invest in. And you are saying that I believe that this management team, that this product or service is something that's going to help a lot of people do well, appreciate and value over time. And that's why I want an ownership position in this company, because a share, a stock is exactly that. You can go over voting, non-voting rights, things like that, publicly traded versus private, all of that. But for publicly traded stock, really, you're just saying, I want a piece of the action. I want to participate in the upside and the downside. Conversely, the market movements that we see when the market goes up and the market goes down based on news, based on geopolitical, based on all these other things that impact sentiment, that is fundamentally a different conversation than how the company you have invested in is doing.
Yeah, and this is why some other people may prefer not to kind of play that game, and or they'll just get an ETF, a mutual fund, a segregated fund, and essentially just kind of defer some of this stuff to the portfolio manager. But still, you're picking what you want your primary geography, risk tolerance, asset allocation to be, but you are offloading some of those decisions, but you still kind of have some insight and input of what part of the market you are hoping will grow, and that's where your money is going. But yeah, you're trying to kind of get the most, and kind of bringing this back to the retirement talk is figuring out which of these choices will give you the most longevity, as long as you're fine kind of riding out the bad times along with being happy about the good times, and also just figuring out how you're going to pay your bills in retirement.
Well, yeah. And I would say, too, that when you buy a fund, as many of us commonly do, or certain types of ETFs or mutual funds, as opposed to individual stock, you are basically just saying, I would like to buy a collection of companies that fit a similar mandate. And this collection of companies is packaged together in a way that if you say, I want dividend paying companies, here's a dividend fund and here's your top holdings of what's in this fund, but every single stock in there has to meet the criteria of paying and increasing a regular dividend, or whatever that particular fund's mandate might be.
So where would I go and find just the line goes up only fund?
There isn't one. It's a GIC, but your performance might be a little bit disappointing. I'm sorry. But no, so think of funds exactly as that. You are picking the type or the category of stocks or stocks to bonds that you want to purchase. And you're saying to a fund manager, hey, this is ultimately what I want to accomplish. Can you do the back end research? Can you meet with the management teams? Can you have these conversations for me with the institutions, and then pick what you feel are the best ones, or the best ones to either have growth potential or whatever else the mandate of the fund could be. Sometimes it's income generation. Package those all together for me, give it a name, and then I'm buying that as a product. Is that like kind of a helpful explanation of what a fund is versus the individual asset?
Yeah, that's essentially it. You are trying to find someone else to deal with the research, to deal with the trading, to deal with the economic oversight, and just kind of make sure that this thing tries its best to make money given the current market conditions. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That's why we've got so many carriers and funds that we work with, because sometimes portfolio manager A does a great job, and sometimes B does a moderate job, C does a terrible job, and then all of a sudden something happens out of nowhere and portfolio manager A is just now a C. So it's nice to have a little flexibility, but it's better than kind of chasing the thousands of stocks, even though it's really just the same 30 or 40 that everyone's buying these days.
Isn't that the truth, hey? But let's get back to my client that we talked about at the beginning of the show. What did he actually want? So out of all of this, he's just looking to find out that he can maintain the same or a consistent standard of living throughout his lifetime. And his worry about the markets is really tied to his worry that his cash flow, his nest egg, is going to decrease to the point where his cash flow is going to change too much for the negative. For a lot of people, I mean, of course you can go broke, but it's more common that lifestyle will decrease first and you kind of progress over time in decumulation to having a little bit less and a little bit less and a little bit less. So he really was just asking the question of, have you tested my portfolio enough for all of the things that go wrong, to the point where I can feel safe that I don't have that security in my job anymore because I've let that go. But do I have security in the testing that's been done on the back end for my portfolio to make sure that every diligence was done so that I know, or I can have some peace of mind that I can maintain my standard of living?
Yeah, we went into the boardroom, we spun the big wheel, and it came up to everything's okay. It was one click away from bankruptcy, but it came out as everything's okay.
You're always one click away from, right? As it goes. But no, think about this as a conversation. Think about people's desire to be able to live the way that they've lived in the past, right? Going back to a prior talk that we had, people feel pain. They feel it emotionally. You feel it in your body, in your bones, when you have to give up something that you had before. It's this ownership mentality that you've taken on ownership of this lifestyle that you have, of your home, your neighborhood, where your kids go to school, the activities that you do on a regular basis, this lifestyle that you've built. And a lot of people just say, I want it to stay the same, or to stay the same within a reasonable range. And it's interesting too, because traditional financial planning looks at 70% of your pre-retirement income, right, as your spend during retirement. But it also makes a lot of assumptions that just aren't true for a lot of people anymore. It assumes you've got a paid up home. That can be pretty challenging depending on when you start. It assumes that you have less expenses and that you had higher expenses because of work. So that could be commuting, that could be your wardrobe, that could be lunches out because you're out and about all the time. But it assumes that there are going to be some decreases that might not happen if you decide to actually go out and do stuff when you've retired, right? Because you're going to have different spending patterns, not necessarily the ones that are tied to what you did on a routine basis when you were at your job.
Yeah, and some people also tend to forget the big I word, inflation. That is another couple percentage points that some people just forget to deal with. I know, like with Christine being a CFP, they kind of have like their recommended ranges, and that typically has inflation built in. So it looks like a lower number than you think it would be. But that's also because the inflation number keeps creeping up and then down and then nothing for 10 years and then just goes crazy for a couple years and then just whatever we are in right now.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things, or actually two of the biggest things that we do for clients when we're testing portfolios is exactly that. It's the inflation test, and it's jacking it up, jacking it down, showing how it changes cash flow and spending. Or if the client's not interested in seeing it, they just want the bottom line, making sure that we've run that in the background for our own peace of mind as we're giving advice in that area. And the second is taxes, the ever forgotten part that decreases what you think you have. Because if you have assets like RSPs, which are converted over to RIFs, you actually don't have that face amount, that sticker amount. You have to adjust it for taxes because the taxes are going to go to the CRA when you take the money out.
Well, before you got into the tax talk, what I was going to say was inflation is the only time where you want the line to go down.
It's true, right? And that's because it materially impacts lifestyle. More inflation, less lifestyle, right? Less available spend on other things. So all of these factors are kind of working against you in a certain sense when you're trying to maintain the same lifestyle. Because really, you're saying, I want things to stay the same, but what's happening in the economy is driving this change where things are costing more. So you're going to have to spend more. And can your portfolio keep up? And a big part of that in these assumptions that we're building is this testing that you do where you have to look at how someone is risk allocated and decide how much of the heavy lifting is going to be done by the portfolio. And you can do this in ranges where you're guesstimating really how much growth you think a portfolio will have for a certain individual. And that's why we've said, if you're the type of person that will, once that job security is gone, be more inclined to pull everything out and put it in a GIC, Please, please, please make sure your financial planner is aware and tests at a much lower rate of return so that your plan is accurate. And they should be running those tests on the back end as well as you're stepping into decumulation, retirement income planning, but not all do. So please make sure that if you're educating yourself in this area, that you are asking those questions and having that proper planning done for you.
And now that you're mentioning GICs, I guess one more big inflation point is that not only do people not kind of always plan for the inflation number affecting everything else, but if inflation gets so bad, then monetary policy has to come and all of a sudden those GICs could be worth more, could be worth less, same with bonds and fixed income. There's all this kind of push and pull on every direction when it comes to inflation and how it can affect the equity, the fixed income side and everything else. So it's something that can't be forgotten in your retirement projections. So look at what you have, look at what you need, shave off a few extra points for inflation, shave off a bunch more for taxes, and see what is that real number and not just that fancy gross number that everyone likes to look at. What is that true net and what's going to keep growing when you pull out every single year what you need?
Well, and that's why, okay, I'm going to date myself a little bit here. Monte Carlo simulations are so popular, or were so popular back in the day, but honestly, I still use them today. Because what a Monte Carlo simulation does is it shows you a range of possibility. And like I say all the time on the show, retirement income planning happens in ranges because we're dealing with unknowns. We do not know what tomorrow's market performance will be. We do not know how many years you're going to need this money. So we plan for a longer age. Like I love to plan to age 100 and say, hey, if you want to be conservative, this is it. If you want to plan to life expectancy, this is the number, but here's the happy medium in between. And a lot of people will honestly, in our practice, use insurance to fill the gap, right? Because they're saying, okay, maybe I want to offload some of this risk or make sure that there's still money for my kids, for my beneficiaries, for my favorite charity. When I've depleted this down, when I've depleted all of my hard life's work, turned it into a lump sum and spent it and see it kind of decrease over time, which, I mean, it's a little sad, right? That makes you emotional as you're using the capital that you worked for.
Yeah, the insurance can help, but we've got a few clients where they will take part of their non-reg or their RIF and they'll convert it over into insurance payments just to make sure there is that nice kind of gift for the kids down the road and they can still live comfortably today.
Well, and if you do it young enough, insurance is one of the best ways to leverage and multiply value. If you do it older, it's kind of dollar for dollar based on age, or it can be more expensive, which can diminish some of the advantage. But if this is planning that you're doing even early retirement, it can have a multiplier effect on your wealth, which is great for the next generation. And it's also good for you because it gives you the peace of mind that you can spend the money more easily, knowing that your kids, your significant other, the people that you care about the most are already taken care of. So one more time, I'm going to go back to my client and go back to this conversation that we've been having in theme this whole way through. What do people actually want when they are looking at their own retirement? And I think when someone is determining when to pull the trigger, the conversation that they have to have with themselves is really one of utility. And bear with me, I'm going to draw a picture with my mind and with my hands. Think about it like a bell curve. No, seriously, where the longer you've been in your career, the more value you will have basically generated in your own self, in the services and the skills that I offer. Hopefully towards the end of my career, I'm making the highest wage that I've made during my career. I'm more experienced. I'm more capable. I'm probably also going to have a lot more stress and a lot more responsibility than I had at the beginning of my career, right? Like I'm more established, unless of course you're in a profession where you get to play golf half the time. But that aside, for the rest of us, as you progress into your career, there's basically more responsibility, more being added on. And I think this conversation around utility is really about maximizing the amount of time that you have to yourself in retirement versus the utility that you can build while you're working. And what I mean by that is after a certain point, the blood, sweat, and tears that you're going to pour into your job has a diminishing value to you as a person because there's only so much money that you can spend during your lifetime Assuming, of course, that the goal is to maintain standard of living and not, of course, go to Vegas and blow the whole thing in a weekend, right? You can always spend more money if you want to. But if we're talking about consistent spending and consistent planning over a period of time, there is a point of enough. And there is a point of enough that occurs that basically says, once you've hit that line and once you've tested to all of these things, longevity, adverse market conditions, inflation, taxes, and a few other back-end tests that we like to throw in there just for fun, then you have that peace of mind that you have done the diligence that is required to kind of say, okay, if I keep working, if I keep sweating, am I earning money that I am going to enjoy? Or am I just spending years of my life that I can't get back to a position that is a higher stress, higher pay, in this particular example, type job, right? How much are those last extra couple years worth versus time of enjoyment in retirement? And with retirement, the big kicker, of course, is we never know how much time we have. So that time has to be something that you value highly as well.
So I guess one of the filters then is, what is that value of how much anger will my family be if I keep working as opposed to just staying home at this point?
Seriously. Well, but that's exactly it. It's financial, it's emotional, and it's relational, right? It's how much time do I need to spend with the people that I love? How much time do I want with the people that I love while I'm in good health, while I'm physically capable? How many things are on my bucket list that I want to make sure that I've crossed off, that if I wait a few years and my health has changed, I might not be able to do, or I might not be able to enjoy to the same capacity that I had prior. So there are so many considerations beyond money. And that's the purpose of this conversation, that yes, this is scary. Yes, this is a huge step. Yes, there are things that can go wrong, but good planning can be that new security blanket where asset allocation works in your favor and testing works in your favor, and you've reserved enough to weather what historically has been the average periods of bad times and bounce backs, and understanding how markets react when they've been down, but they want to move back up, or we're in a recession and we're climbing out of it and we're starting a new business cycle. All of these economics that come behind have to play into retirement accumulation planning, because market cycle, like we said mid-show, is so important to you in terms of how long your money will last and how much on a dollar amount you can ultimately take out of your portfolio.
Yeah, and I think this current stage of the market cycle can just be called insanity. So get used to it.
It illustrates the point perfectly. And like we said, there's lots that you can do in terms of products that you can purchase, in terms of asset allocation, to delegate risk to someone else, to say, you know what, this risk is more than I can handle. So I'm going to take a passive income strategy. I'm going to buy an annuity. I'm going to have a portion of my portfolio in GICs or bonds. There are things that we can do for you to help you to manage risk, to manage the downside. So if you find yourself close to retirement and decumulation is on your mind, find us at Braun Financial, braunfinancial.com. We have a lot of experience. I'm coming on my 20th year in this industry. 16 of those will be client facing. We have a ton of experience doing back-end testing for people on these portfolios, and we can really help you understand what different market conditions will do to the assets that you have and how to manage some of that risk so that your money lasts as long as possible and that it's allocated properly and that it's in the right types of accounts for the withdrawal strategy that we're hoping to use for you. Until next time, take care.
And all the best.
Yeah, you'll be the dancing clip at the end this time.